Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us. I am here with one of my absolute favorite YouTubers, one of the people that I go to for big picture analysis, what's coming up, understanding the regulations, Rob from Digital Asset News. He's one of my favorite YouTube channels. Thanks so much for being here today with us, Rob.
You're so kind. Thanks, Teresa. Good to have you. Good to be here.
Okay, so let's dive in because we've got lots of cool things coming up. I would love to have your take on. Let's talk regulations and what's coming up for the big picture for cryptocurrency. I'd love your thoughts on that.
I think, so with regulation, this is a very unpopular opinion in the crypto space because everybody got into it. It was all about anarchists, libertarianism, whatever you want to call it. And they really got into it and no one really wanted to have any kind of regulation because it was an open source. It was decentralized. And we just said, you know what? We don't need government. We're trying to get away from government. That's the whole reason why Bitcoin was created. And, 2008, 2009, after the big crash of 2008 for the housing market. So when I say that we need a little bit of regulation, it's very unpopular because people are like, well, how can you say that? How can you be in cryptocurrency? But it makes sense. It makes sense because we need a little bit of regulation just to protect the small person, because how many people out there, not only just the scams and everything else, but the people that just get taken advantage of because they don't know exactly what they're doing, or they're getting into something that they really shouldn't be able to get into because of whatever it is, in exchange across the pond, something else that comes up. They're like, no, we can't allow that, or ICOs or whatever else. That, of course, get rug pulled on top of the DeFi space, which it also happens. So when I say that a little regulation goes a long way, I mean it. We did this just fine back in the early 90s when we were trying to regulate the internet. Just a little bit came about, and look, everything flourished. The problem is when people or government tries to overregulate. So where do I think things are going? Well, it just depends. If government looks at the past and says, guess what? We did a really great job with the internet. We're able to regulate just a little bit and things just started to really take off. But if they start to do what I think they're trying to do right now, where Gensler has his opinion, Gary Gensler, head of the SEC, where he's like, you know what, I think there's a lot more securities out there than what we are being led to believe, and I really want to put my stamp on things, then things could take a really nasty turn. Now, what could happen? Well, it's okay because it's a pretty big world. We're not in the 1960s where we're just stuck at home. All these companies that say, well, if you're going to regulate here in the United States, no big deal. We'll go to Malta. We'll go to the EU. We'll go to other countries where we don't have these headaches, and we'll flourish over there. And that is the big problem I think could happen.
Yeah, interesting. So what would you see as an ideal level of regulation then?
That's a good one. So if I was the SEC,
if you were God for a day.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it comes down to. I think I would set it up like, I always think of it like this. First of all, we have to differentiate between what certain things are. When I was in the Army and I was a medic, we would do these things called triage. So patients would come in, we would determine their level of health and how badly wounded they were. I think there should be some kind of triage in these different organizations. So you could have somebody put in place to say, okay, this is a security, SEC, that's your job. This is a commodity, CFTC, that is your job. This is a currency, OCC, this is your job. And then you could just start right there. I think if we could just get that part really concrete out, and we could go from there, I think the rest of things would kind of follow, and the SEC could do their thing, the CFTC could do their thing, and the OCC could do their thing. But I think you really need to set that up first. Just a little triage. Worked pretty well for medicine.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, great way to put it. What level do you think the US has on global thinking on cryptocurrency? You mentioned briefly that you think people might just leave the US or go outside of US jurisdiction depending on what comes down. Do you think other countries will follow suit for whatever the US does here?
There was something that Anthony Pompliano said, and he talked about creating a vacuum. And he says, and it made a lot of sense, if the American government comes in and really swoops and starts to crack down hard, which really goes against the whole free market system, if they do that, then of course it'll clamp down here, but it'll create a vacuum and everything will just flow out to other countries. Can every single country come about and do the exact same thing that a China does? that America does? I don't think so. I think because these different countries, somebody out there is going to be smart enough. I mean, we would hope so, to say, you know what? I think I know where the hockey puck is going. I don't think it really comes about with centralized banks and using the SWIFT system and really doing the old-fashioned type of a banking network that we have today. Maybe what we need is something else that we could use, and maybe there's a lot more money to be made in that regard and bringing people in the future. So I think that the whole entire world could do what America is doing and what China, I shouldn't really say America is doing and China's doing. That is completely different things. But we'll say like what China's doing, no. And what America is doing, no. I think there's going to be some country smart enough, El Salvador, for example, that says, you know what, I think we know where we're going. I think we're going to really do this the right way.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, it's interesting watching the outflow of wealthy, the outflow of online businesses that are like moving from the high tax countries, the high regulation countries, and relocating themselves in other jurisdictions. It's kind of fascinating to watch that overregulation is its own equalizer in a way. Regulate too much, people just leave. Isn't that fascinating that we live in a world now where people have that opportunity?
Well,
you
yeah.
know?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Look what Apple did. Apple said, you know what, we don't like all the different tax laws that we have here. Let's just move a bunch of our shipping over to Ireland. Seems to work out okay for them. And then Microsoft does the same thing. And then you have all the other big countries that just kind of pick and choose where they want to go. And people they get upset because they're like, well, why aren't they paying the taxes? And why aren't they paying this? They're playing by the rules. And the rules state that they don't have to be here and they can ship everything over. Now, if that changes, then there's more provisions around the corner, but that is the way it is. And if they would just stop doing these things, just allow things to flourish, it would be okay.
Yeah. It's fascinating that if you aren't, going where you're treated best, your competitors probably are. So it's kind of interesting watching what happens in this realm of choosing regulations and determining what's going on. As someone, I used to Forex trade for a hobby many, many years ago. Yeah. And that was a fairly heavily regulated forum. And then coming over in crypto where there's no regulation, it's been fascinating seeing the pros and cons of that. So I tend to agree with you. A small amount of regulation, not a bad thing, because when you're in an entirely deregulated environment, it also, allows the market manipulators, the unscrupulous to come in and be the bully in the playground, So I actually think the government has a very valuable role here. It'll just be interesting to see if they find that nice tipping ground of regulating enough that it's a fair and equal market and not so much that it's, has people leaving in droves.
I know, I totally agree. Teresa, that's a great point. And so there's really two ways I look at it. One is the speed limit and one is spoofing. The speed limit, I kind of compare it to like this. Like we need a little bit of a speed limit here and there, right? Nobody wants to have the school zone that you can go 80 miles per hour in. That doesn't work. But nobody wants to go cross country on the highway at 10 miles per hour. So you have to find that little bit of give and take. And then as far as like spoofing, I know people will say, well, you know what, Rob, who cares about regulation? Because even in the traditional markets, they're still going to play the game. They're still going to get around things. They're still going to abuse the system. True. I mean, we saw what happened with JP Morgan spoofing the precious metals market and silver and things like that. But at least there is some kind of repercussions. At least they get a slap on the wrist, a little bit of a fine, whatever that fine was, 100 billion or whatever else, which is just the cost of doing business. But if you don't have something in place, then just like you said, the bully can go around and do exactly what they want to and have no repercussions. I think there has to be something in place to protect them just a little bit, because if not, then who wants to stay in this space for too long? Look, we just had, Polymarket just got hacked for $600 million. Now, hopefully
that's got to hurt.
that's got to hurt some people. But I mean, there should be some safeguards in place a little bit down the road. Fortunately, from what I understand, is the hacker is actually giving back some of the money, which is insane to even think about, but that it is happening right now. Who knows if he, she, they are going to give back the whole thing. But this happens time and time and time again. So we can either do this until a lot of people lose their money and then we figure out the right way, or have a little bit of regulation to give us that buffer zone until we get to the finish line. I'm not sure how it works, though.
Yeah, really. So SEC Ripple lawsuit.
Ooh.
What are your thoughts on that? What do you see as the most likely outcome? What's going to be the impact on the crypto market, depending on which direction we go? What do you see as the possible scenarios here?
Well, I got to tell you, it's like one of the worst timings of all time, right? Like just as we were starting to really take off and the market was just going just start up to the moon, then all of a sudden Ripple gets hit with that lawsuit. Chris Larson and Brad Garlinghouse, named specifically, I believe. And was it Chris Larson or was it?
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if they wouldn't have gotten hit with that, the price of XRP, just the price discovery zone would have been, who knows, 2x, 3x, 4x by this point. It was just kind of funny timing how it all kind of came about. Jay Clayton was on his way out. He's like, you know what I'm going to do on my way out? I'm going to get these guys. So what concerns me about it is that I do think it has a ripple effect, pardon the pun, throughout the whole cryptocurrency and digital asset space, because they're trying to determine what a security is. And what concerns me about Gensler is that the precedent was that Bitcoin was not a security because there was so much decentralization, and they could prove it. Ethereum, even Clayton talked about this, that it was decentralized, therefore it wasn't a security. And that was like one of the big factors as they look at the Howey test. And now we take a look at XRP. I know some people out there will say, well, it's not decentralized, doesn't have enough nodes. Well, look, EOS had 24 nodes. And in the very beginning for the ICO, they got slapped with a fine. I think, they paid a couple billion or something like that, but they made 100 billion, so who cares? And they are off and running, and that was the SEC's whole provision against them. So the whole thing with Ripple is they have many more nodes than that. I know people will debate it, but I think there's over 100 now. So if you're taking a look at the decentralized part, I think that is just one issue. But I'm kind of looking down the pipe to see about how everything went with Brad Garlinghouse and Larson and how they did everything as far as push the narrative as far as XRP and as far as the company. And I think that's the bigger repercussion potentially, but we'll see how it all plays out. I will say this, my personal opinion is they're going to get a fine, a big fine. And because no one wants to keep dragging this out forever, it costs money and costs manpower. Let's hopefully they just say, okay, we're going to pull an EOS here and we're going to fine you this much. Don't do that again. And let's move forward. And then that's it.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
What do you think the final declaration is going to be in the outcome then?
No, as far as I don't think that Ripple would sign away if they say, okay, now you can say that we're a security, because that would change everything. That would change the whole dynamic. And then if it does that and says that's a security, what's to say that the next project isn't a security? And what does that mean for the overall exchanges? Now they have to have license for registered securities. And they have to be able to list those securities. So like a Coinbase has to change everything. A Kraken, a Voyager, name all the exchanges. They have to change the way they operate. So it'd be very expensive for them. And where does that price get passed on to? They're going to get hit. And then of course we're going to get hit. And I think it will just be again, another big ripple effect. I think the only thing that is a registered security right now is the Celsius token. That is a registered security. That's why a lot of the exchanges don't carry it. Or one of the reasons, I should say.
Interesting. So given a fine and a positive ruling that they're not a security, what do you think will be the ramifications for other altcoins in the crypto market in general?
I think it would be, here's the fascinating thing. The news, I think, moves the markets. We can take a look at technical analysis, and that would help to see where things are going. But usually when we would get any kind of negative news, the market would dip drastically. How many times do we hear about China banning cryptocurrency and then it would drop? How many times do we hear about India banning cryptocurrency and it would drop? And of course, it doesn't matter because they've been doing it forever. But we had two big news stories. One was the hack for Polymarket, and the other one was what we just talked about with all the things going on. And those two things that came about the infrastructure bill and the language that was written as far as who was protected, proof of work, proof of stake, operators, and so on and so forth. And it was two negative big news. And what happened to the market? It went up. So if I have to take a look at things, and I'm wondering who actually is moving this market right now, there was a report that just came out, the earnings report for Coinbase, and it was 68% of all the trades were being done by institutional investors. So if you kind of take a look at who is moving the market, maybe they look at this and go, great, now we're going to get some clarity. Now we're going to get some more regulation. And whatever happens, this is where we want to go. And now we can actually get into it. So do I think that this regulation, if it does come down the pipe and they say, okay, XRP is a security, which means Solana is now a security, which means that Theta is now a security, which means this and that. They have to go through, I think, what would be all of those different lawsuits for those thousands of different tokens. Yeah. Good luck with that. But
really, 100 years from now,
right? They, they can print as much money as they want to because they're going to need to print that for all the lawyers that they're going to need. But if they can just pick and choose, I think that's what's going to happen down the pipe. And I think there's only so much they can do for each project. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, really good. Top picks for altcoins right now, given what's going on in the broader scheme. What are your faves right at the moment?
Today is the 12th, August 12th, 2021, Thursday. Tomorrow, there's going to be an announcement by Charles Hoskinson about smart contracts. They've already talked to Emergo and IOHK and the different foundations, and they've already picked a date of when that's actually going to go live. Alonzo Testnet is actually being integrated, so everything looks like it's good. So by tomorrow, once they announce that date, I think you're going to see more of a jump with Cardano right now. This is not investment advice, it's just investment opinion. But if my mom asked me right now, I would tell her to invest into Cardano because I think it's going to go up. It's a safe bet, but it all depends on what you want to do and what your goals are. If you want to be a little more risky, I have been looking at, I just did a deep dive on Avalanche. And I think it's another great smart contract platform. It's run by some really smart people and the team is outstanding. And I think they can do great things. So Solana, Avalanche, Cardano, can't go wrong with those ones.
Love it. Cardano's my absolute love. Favorite coin. Perfect. NFTs. What are your thoughts on NFTs right now? So
NFTs are going to be the next, everybody talks about they're the next big thing. I never really got it because I look at it and I'm like, they're just, like to me, it's like trading cards, digitalized trading cards, essentially. That's what I look at it. But what's great about it is that it's pretty, you can't lose them. It's pretty easy to declare your ownership. And speaking of Theta, they just had a deal with the ACC to do all of their NFTs. And of course, that they are the ones that are brokerage or they are in management of top music talent and top acting talent, like Katy Perry, like Terry Crews, like people like that. So if they're going to look to celebrities as far as like NFTs, that's going to be a big thing down the road. We just did an NFT for Digital Asset News through Theta, and it went way better than I thought it would because I was like, I don't see why people would buy these things, but they seem to love them. And it's not my place to say, what do you want to buy? It's just, you tell me what you want, and that's pretty much where we go. But I see down the road, not just about these trading cards and in-game purchases and things like that. NFTs, remember, they're non-fungible, which means when you have those, there is just one of those, and they are designated to you. So I think for like land ownership, for like property rights, for like patents, for things like that, you can put those all on the blockchain as an NFT and give those out to those individual businesses or corporations or whoever else. I think that's the next evolution of real NFTs and how much those are worth. How much would it be worth to you to store those in a decentralized way as opposed to someplace else in a centralized government where you're like, well, it should be there, but who knows?
Brilliant. So let's talk crypto investing, where to start, because I know you and I have chatted about this a lot. And in the world of crypto investing, there's a whole gamut of, there's the HODL strategy, like just buy something and hold on for dear life, right? And then there's kind of more what we might refer to as swing trading, which is like people who just, buy the market dips and sell the peaks and make a lot of money just moving between the very large swings. You might be doing a few investments a year, which truthfully, that's the majority of what I do, are these large swing investments. And then we get more of the pattern traders that are maybe doing 2 or 3 trades a month on these big pattern breakouts. And then you get day traders who are like trading all the time, constantly in there, all the way down to scalpers who are doing trades on the 1 minute. And, we all know, and you and I have talked about this a lot of traders, if they go into the severe end, and the trading houses themselves announce these statistics, 80% of people trading with leverage on that high end are losing money. Isn't that an interesting statistic? I'd love your overall thoughts on, if you're just starting in this, where in this spectrum should you be sitting so that you maximize your returns?
You know what? I liked how we talked about this before the video, and now I look at it a little bit differently. And it's like this. Remember when you first started, like your first job at some whatever, Teresa, wherever you started your first job at?
Donut shop.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go beyond that. Let's say like a salary position, a little bit up there, and then maybe you sat down with the person who, for your company, for your 401k person, right? And they're like, look, here is the spectrum, and because at this point you're probably a little bit younger, you would say you want to be a little bit more risky and get into here because there's more of a payoff. But if you're like older, like me now, they probably would say, well, Rob, you're getting up there, so we want you to be a little bit more safer in what you do. So now I kind of see it like as everything's on a spectrum as far as like trading. If you want to be risky and do those leverage trades, you can do it, but just know that it's super risky, and the chances of you losing your shirt are pretty high. I get emails all the time about people going, hey, I saw your channel. Really wish I would have found you a little bit ago because I was doing leverage trade and I lost everything. What do I tell my wife? And I'm like, first of all, tell your wife right now before she kills you. And then second of all, don't do that again unless you know what you're doing, which very few people do. But then you have, like you just talked about, like, the scalpers, all right. Then you have a little bit more of like the pattern traders, like you and the guys at Market Rebellion. They kind of look at the patterns and go, okay, I'm gonna do a little bit of this. And that's not as risky. And then of course there's people like me way over here who, I'm not here for a month or 6 months or a year. First of all, I've been in this space since 2017, and I've just been dollar cost averaging, getting in, mostly just getting in and then getting out a little bit, maybe selling, like we say, 2 or 3 times at the top for an exit strategy, and then reinvesting those into other things like I talk about, like my properties or land, my other businesses. And that seems to work out okay. You can do those things, but just know that over time, it's a safer bet and you probably will make a good amount of money. Or you can be over here and become the first day trader to ever make $1 billion, which would be like 0.001% chance of that happening. Or you could lose everything. Or which would be even worse, like when I lived in Vegas, I always had these guys, friends of mine, who would come up and say, Rob, I made a killing last night. I made $5,000. I'm like, dang, that's good, Pete. How'd you do that? I hit the flush and it was great. And we were playing poker. I'm like, well, how much are you up for the year? Well, I'm not up for the year. I'm down like 20,000, but last night was awesome. And I go, yeah, that's, I think, how traders kind of like talk to each other. Like, I'm up big time. Are you up for the year? No. I've lost a ton. But the ones that do, I think, are few and far between. There are some ones out there. I just don't see them too much. And I'm just over here on this side.
Yeah, love it. So excited to have you speaking at our Conscious Crypto Traders event. Love your high level analysis, Dan. I'm looking forward to seeing what you contribute to the debate. I know you're both speaking and on the panels for us. And I just thank you so much for being here today to impart your wisdom to our following. I really appreciate it. We are so excited to have Rob as one of the expert panelists and speakers at our upcoming Conscious Crypto event. This event is going to focus on how to really become a successful investor and trader in the cryptocurrency space. So we are really excited to be partnering together some of the top YouTubers on how to analyze price action and some of the top YouTubers on understanding the industry and what's going on as a whole. So we're really excited to have Rob add his voice to this mix. This is going to be a deep dive into some of the conversations you need to understand the overarching realm of cryptocurrency and how to become successful in this space. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and select all. That way you will get notified when we upload other tutorial videos, price analysis videos, or just overall scenarios that could affect the price of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. Until next time, trade consciously.